Now, I am handing over to Renza Scibilia, who will facilitate a Q&A plus panel discussion on some of the things we've heard about DIY, about the personal story of Minu, about the research of Dawn, and about the access discussions and the situation. And you are all welcome to come forward with comments, with questions, with own perspectives to the microphones up here. You're also, as I said, welcome to ask questions through the ATTD app or on our Facebook comments, and I will throw them in as they come.
Yeah, I'll send them straight to my phone. Hi, everybody. I'm so thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled that I'm looking out to an absolutely packed hall and a sea of faces, so thank you so much for being here. I would ask everybody to consider throughout the remainder of this really important and crucial conference to consider things through the lens of people who are not necessarily going to be accessing easily or at all the latest shiny gadgets. It's something that I know that I'm guilty of. I come from Australia. We last year celebrated and continue to celebrate CGM for all people with type 1 diabetes. The only requirement is that you have type 1 diabetes and then you are eligible. There's no further hoops that we must jump through. It's too easy for us to take that for granted and to think, well, this is the reality for everyone with diabetes. It's not the reality for everyone with diabetes in Australia, even with that, but certainly around the globe. So throughout this week, as you are listening to talks about the latest and greatest in technologies, and we absolutely should be celebrating that, ask about what's being done when it comes to access so that we can level the playing field as much as we possibly can when it comes to people living with diabetes around the world. Now, I get to ask questions, but I always say, please make me do as little work as possible by coming up to the microphones and asking questions. You've got an incredibly dynamic panel here who would be very happy to ask your questions. Eritrea, you can come right here. You can just walk right there. In fact, I'm going to let you ask the first question. Could you please identify yourself, tell us who you are, where you're from, and ask your question to whoever you would like to do that.
Hi, DDoc friends. I'm Eritrea Musa. I work at the DiTribe Foundation as a social media manager. I also co-host Diabetics Doing Things. My question is for Hamida. First of all, as an African person, I'm so happy to see you here. Thank you for being here representing Uganda. For those of us who are not too familiar with the Sonia Nabeta Foundation, what can we as people with diabetes and HCPs do to support you and to help the people in Uganda?
Are the microphones on? You might just need to tap.
Thank you so much. The Sonia Nabeta Foundation is a non-profit organization that specializes specifically about children living with type 1 diabetes in sub-Saharan African countries, and you can visit their website, which is available, www.thesonianabetafoundation.org, or you can check them out on their Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Yes, we have quite a number of projects where we reach out to our warriors in Uganda, and for anyone who would like to collaborate or to reach out to the foundation, they have their email addresses on their websites, and there is an option to donate.
And if there are people on social media, as I know there are in this room, share details of the foundation. Dawn, I want to ask you a question to start with, if that's all right now. I'm delighted to see that there is so much effort being, or a lot of effort to start with, about diabetes and menopause. 25 years ago or 21 years ago when I started working in diabetes advocacy, there wasn't all that much information that was really aimed at people with diabetes who were planning pregnancies, and suddenly there was a community groundswell that made that happen. Is that what we're seeing now? And is it the same people who 25 years ago were desperate for information about diabetes and pregnancy? Is that the cycle of what happens in our community?
I think that is probably the population that you're looking at. As I said in the talk, whenever I have 4 sons, so I had 4 pregnancies, which resulted in live births. Each pregnancy I was told I was in a study group. I was in Manderson et al.'s pre and post prandial glucose study from I was co-opted into it in 1997, it was published in 2004. I was also in the diabetes and preeclampsia intervention trial, so I kind of thought, in my naivety, as did many of my friends who are now in a menopause mothers WhatsApp group with me, that whenever you went through various life stages with diabetes, you were suddenly roped in to research by your consultant. You didn't have like a get-out clause, you were there. You had data, they were going to harvest it, they were going to publish 1 million papers, and people coming behind you would suddenly know all these amazing, wonderful things, and that would just pave the way ahead for people coming in our wake, as I said. So yeah, I think whenever a number of us started going through menopause, perimenopause, and realizing there were differences, we started asking questions. And when I asked my consultant in 2015 what information she could give me as someone living with type 1 diabetes about menopause, her initial response was, "You're a midwife, you know this stuff." Okay, and then she directed me to an information leaflet. It was an A4 page, folded in 3, and it said, "Check your blood glucose levels more regularly."
Isn't that the answer to everything? Like, I feel like that's just the answer to everything with diabetes,
Yeah.
is just check your glucose
Check
levels
your blood
more.
glucose levels more regularly. By 2016, whenever I was using Freestyle Libre, I went, but it's checking for me. If I scan 3 times, if I scan every 8 hours, I get 24 hours worth of data. What else am I meant to do? You know, what am I meant to find? And that was where the conversations with others within the diabetes community started to come from, because it was actually really frustrating. When you go into an appointment with someone who is meant to be the expert in your condition, with someone who you've been trusting to get you through pregnancy safely, to get you through breastfeeding safely, to get you to your next pregnancy safely. And you ask, okay, now that I've come past that phase of my life, what happens now? To be met with, yeah, check your blood glucose levels more regularly. Yeah, you work in a profession which basically knows more about this stuff than I ever will. It felt quite disheartening. But it was even more disheartening for women who didn't have the midwifery knowledge, who didn't have access to Libres. And that was where we built up a support network in the background. And I am so grateful, so thankful to that support network, because we have managed to get a research paper out there as a proof of concept study. And I really do hope that other people now feel that they can take it, that they can run with it. And because our contact details are very widely available in social media, we're not hard to find, and we're more than happy to be involved in more detailed, more in-depth research as well.
Thanks, Dawn. And we're going to come back to talking about just that power of community. And I know that we kept talking about diabetes online community earlier. It's not just online communities. Communities don't have to only be online. It is however people with diabetes congregate, whether that be in real life or on Twitter. Bastian, you've got some comments there, I think, that you want to share.
So
You're not on, yeah.
I'd say we stick to that, because there is a question to you, Dawn and Katharina. You've partly answered it already, but it's by Mary Murphy from the ATTD app, so someone who's following ATTD virtually. What can us women, you women with diabetes, do to help highlight the issues we have managing our blood sugars and help ourselves? Do you want to go first, or Katharina, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Thanks, Mary, for that important question. I think the first step is awareness building, because although half of the population with diabetes are women, this is not well researched enough. There's very little evidence published outside the context of pregnancy about women with diabetes. So bring it up in the talks with your provider. Ask these questions, make people aware of that this is an under-researched area. It might not be something that is well-funded, but that can change through awareness. And keep an eye out, because we are for sure going to look into this aspect with Open. There will be the Type 2 period project and so forth. So hopefully that's going to change. Do you want to add in?
Yeah, just to add to that, no matter which country you live in, you do have diabetes organisations which are there to support you and to help you. And they're meant to be patient-led groups. They're meant to be able to reach out and answer or help to provide the answers that you're looking for. So don't be afraid to approach them. If there is something that's a burning issue with you, and you don't want to approach them as a lone individual, do find others within your community who are more than happy to band with you, because there's power in numbers, there's strength in numbers. One of the things that I did say at the physics conference was quantitative data carries a heck of a lot more power than qualitative data whenever it comes to medicine. Whenever you're using any of the open APS systems, there is so much quantitative data in that, it's very hard to argue with it.
Yeah, and I think it's also not just accepting the check your blood glucose more frequently. And I know that diabetes is such a hard gig, and to have to add on top of that we've got to go in and fight to actually be heard and for our concerns actually to be taken seriously is really tough. But that's where community, I think, is really powerful, because if you can point to something to say, this isn't just me, there is a proof of concept, whatever it might be, and highlight that there is data, suddenly those stories that can often be really easily dismissed have got that evidence behind them. I always talk about hearts and minds. It's always about, you know, hearts and minds, and when we bring those things together, we're a lot harder to ignore and to be ignored. So I always think that that's really critical as well. Is there something, was there another?
Yes, there is another question for Katharina that takes a different perspective. The question is from Nina Tusch, one of our DIYAPS voices. She asked, Katharina, how do you think that the advent and the reimbursement of commercial closed-loop systems will affect the DIY-APS community? We've kind of touched upon this earlier today, but go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Nina. I think both worlds already influence each other in the best way possible. So the approval processes of many of the commercial AID systems, that has for sure been accelerated by the open source AID community. But we've heard a lot about access today. So not everyone will have access to a commercial AID system. For some people, AID is not available at all. For some people, it will be the only way for them to use an AID system, to DIY it. So the reimbursement of commercial systems will provide more choice for some, but not for all.
And
Question. Oh, okay. We might go here first. Thank you.
Levi from Israel. I'm a pediatric endocrinologist, and it was amazing to hear you, the community. But with the many options you have with the yourself open access loop, we physicians are finding ourselves in a special condition where we cannot help our patients. They are using many kinds of do-it-yourself systems, which we do not understand, we do not know. The official sites, I have been through them, I don't understand exactly how the algorithm plays. And if you think that every child who is in a do-it-yourself system is controlled, it's not. So we are now in a situation that we have to guide our patients, but we not have enough information or education or knowledge. And I find it not enough with whatever it's going on the net, on the community, because we didn't tell our patient, okay, it's not legal, so we won't treat you. We told them, if it helps you, we're happy to go with it, because you are living with diabetes, we don't have better options to offer you. But now we cannot offer them the optimal thing. We have many patients do-it-yourself facilities. They don't know much about the net. We are in the Middle East, and they are not controlled. They're having high numbers and then low numbers. We don't know what to change in the system, and what the community is going to do to solve our problem now with this sophisticated problem.
Okay, Kati, I'm going to throw this to you, but I will just also say the burden of diabetes is so huge. Are we now adding to it that we have to solve problems for health professionals on top of everything else? Kati, fix this for us, please.
Yeah, sure. That's a difficult one. As you said, you're not sure how to guide the patients. Let the patients guide you, because they have all the lived experience with that. And if you spend time with us people from the We Are Not Waiting community, you know we're willing to share. And it should be a bilateral dialogue, right? So hear their stories, maybe ask them about their learnings, and if the documentation on the internet is too complicated to understand, don't hesitate to reach out and have them break it down for you. That's how we all started our DIY AID journey as people with diabetes, and I'm sure will be feasible for physicians as well. Saying this as someone who's both.
And can I also point out that we are having these conversations at these forums now and have been for quite some time, and very much the people who are educating here are people like Dana Lewis, who has spoken at so many conferences about her experiences and what this means and the technical side of things. I would advise that if you see that on a program at a conference and you are privileged enough to be at a conference, go to those sessions. Go to the sessions where there are people with diabetes. And I know I am preaching to the converted because you're all here right now, but tell your friends, tell the ones who aren't here. And I know that there are often clashing sessions that are all important, but I will say this until I'm blue in the face, and it is the hill that I will die on. The most important people that you should be listening to are people with diabetes. So when they're standing on a stage, go and listen to them. It's an easy way to actually hear and learn. Yes, hello.
Hello, yes. So first of all, I'm gonna apologize for my English is kind of rusty. So I wrote my question in the translator, and I hope I can get the message straight. So first of all, before my question, I would like to congratulate all of you because of your remarkable work. I also have type 1 diabetes. So from the community, thank you very much for the hard work you're doing. And precisely, my question is taking into account the elephant in the room, which is access and the budget and the economic terms. How do you suggest or recommend justifying this type of option in economic terms to the decision makers? Like, if you have any studies, I know Dr. Brun has some studies. I researched a couple of them, but if you have some studies that can justify this option as available for a national health system. Thank you. My name is Bruno, by the way.
Thanks, Bruno. Also, can I just say your English is perfect, and as somebody who speaks one language only, I'm astonished. Okay, Katerina, I am astonished constantly. Katerina, sorry, I'm throwing it back to you again.
I can only agree with you. Access is just as much of an issue as I said earlier. Now is the time to look into personalization, just as important. And I think this session and every of the talks highlighted that a little more. And it does not matter from what person that perspective is coming. Access and availability, always an issue.
Thank you. Great. We asked a question this morning at the open closing conference, and I'm going to ask it again because I think it's really important, and I'm going to ask everybody on the panel, including you, Bastian, to answer this, and that is, actually I'm going to ask it in a minute because we've got a question down the back. How's that for suspense? Hello.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, but speak louder.
Hi, I'm Lauren. So I'm a hybrid as well. I really like that term. So I'm a healthcare professional. I'm a doctor in training in the UK, working in adult diabetes. And I've lived with type 1 diabetes for many years as well. So I guess I've got two questions for you. So the first is, this is an incredible online diabetes community, but I wonder what the representation is like within that community. You know, what proportion of people with diabetes do you think you represent, and do you have any data on that? That's the first question. And the second question is, you know, the patients, people living with diabetes I see in clinic, you've got the kind of top 10%, those sorts of individuals you're talking about that come from a 7% HbA1c to 6%. They're the top league, if you like. But then you've also got that the other 10% also who really struggle. You know, they're individuals that live with a HbA1c over 100 millimolar or 12%. And for those patients, the technology is just not even in the stratosphere. So I wonder, what can we do to support those individuals who really do struggle with diabetes and are at the most risk? How can we enable access to open source and looping for those individuals?
Okay, let's start with there's a lot to unpack, so get comfortable, folks. Okay, Hamida, I'm going to ask you, if that's okay, to start with this question specifically around how is it that people with diabetes who are struggling, but even I think people who might not necessarily be struggling, or you don't know, but how can they be supported? What sort of things can health professionals do, and can others in the community do to support people?
Well, I think some of the solutions that you can have to have access for people from different parts of the world, like Africa, Uganda, is first of all having devices that can be compatible to the living situations. Like, for example, electricity, where in Uganda it is very common that you will have electricity in the morning, and within a few minutes, power will be gone. So how will you be able to charge your CGM when you don't have power? And another thing is focusing on the social challenges, like poverty, having education, whereby the warriors themselves that we support, or the warriors that we work for, have an opportunity to have education, live gainful lives, whereby in the future, we can see them being able to support themselves, because at the end of the day, you're going to give a warrior a CGM or a pump. Are they going to be able, you can't have a CGM, you can't have insulin when you don't have food. So focusing on the social challenges and having devices which are compatible to the living conditions of the warriors is really a good solution.
Thank you. Bastian.
As we're just talking about this, there's a whole number of comments and questions towards you and your foundation and your work, and we won't be able to address all of them, but there are some comments about, great to have you here, we need to make sure that there's more voices from the African continent coming here. We already said in the beginning we were supposed to have 2 more voices from Africa joining us here. They were both denied a visa. We are very, very sorry for that. We hope to improve our work on the DIDOC side as well. But there's one more comment here that I do want to pose to you, because it's coming from someone in Uganda following live through Facebook. And his name is Ivan Muzeyi. Ivan? Live from Uganda, he says, what alternatives have you been able to use to solve some of the social determinants of health, like illiteracy and poverty, that you have been addressing? So what approaches have you been taking to actually work with that, both personally or through your foundation?
7 years ago, when I started my advocacy journey, I was 18 years, and I was given an opportunity to attend one of the camps that we have held in different parts of Uganda. Through these camps, we reach out to warriors from all kinds of backgrounds. We sit with them in a camp of like 4 days, and we get to find out some of all these challenges. And one of the challenges that we found out is the distance that the warriors themselves have to take from home to the clinic. Some of our warriors have to travel for more than 5 miles to get to the clinic. Mind you, without food, or sure whether I'm going to get something on the way. And some of the solutions to that started in 2020, when COVID came in the country, and we managed to come up with a project known as Project Boda Boda, and it has been able to serve more than thousands of warriors in Uganda, where we facilitate them with transport refund from where they stay up to the clinic, such that they can either get something on their way to eat, and to reduce on the burden of the distance and what they had to eat. There is another program which focuses on education, and I am one of the alumni who are part of the program, which focuses on basically educating warriors such that they can be the advocates themselves, the ambassadors of their own lives, in order to be able to reduce on the challenges that lead to reduce on the death rates of young people in sub-Saharan African countries are estimated. You cannot live more than 1 year in sub-Saharan African countries if you don't have access to all these things that you need as a warrior. Yes, and with quite a number of things, personally as a person, I was able to hold a campaign in Uganda where I focused on creating awareness about type 1 diabetes in schools, and I've been able to attend different workshops and conferences to collaborate within different partners in Uganda and with the organization, taking my studies and research to Malawi, and to find out basically the challenges, the mental health that involves living with type 1 diabetes as an African person. How do you stay connected? How do you stay empowered? Because there are quite a number of challenges that can lead you to break down in very many cases. So that is when I started my YouTube channel. Actually, the conference inspired me to come up with a channel where I can bring people closer to the realities of living with diabetes in Africa. So everyone who would love to follow the journey, you can subscribe to the channel. My username is @AfricanDiabetic. So for anything and any updates about the news and everything about diabetes in Africa, anyone can be tuned.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got a question here.
Hello.
That's on.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sahil Madan, and I'm from India. I've been living with type 1 diabetes for 11 years, and I have been working as a HCP as well with a German company for 8 years. And I think we have talked a lot about tech access in different countries. Specifically, now we're talking about India, Pakistan, and other Asian countries as well. Being on the both side of it, living with type 1 diabetes and being a HCP for almost 8 years, I think what we need to understand is that when the tech is developed, it has to be adapted according to the economy of that particular country or the access. For example, in India, we have a lot of pumps available, but again, if we compare how expensive they are, whether that support is available, whether it's available in India or not. So that is one thing where it has to be, I think someone asked that question from behind. I think this is the answer for this being on the both side of it, and how we can actually start something which can actually lead to better adaptation of these tech in smaller countries as well.
Thank you. Thanks. Does anybody want to make any comment on that comment, or Kati, did you? No? Yes, go.
Yeah. Call to action at all the pharma and industry at ATTD. Please consider making your stuff more affordable and widely accessible. And just to comment on that question, how can you support people that struggle? As a healthcare professional, don't judge them. Give them time to talk and listen to them, what's actually causing them stress, because that might be multifold. For some people, it might be the availability of tools. For some people, that might be purely out of stress. For some people, that might be knowledge that they don't have. So try to identify with them, not for them, where the deficit is. And if it's stress, then consider getting a psychologist involved that knows about type 1 diabetes. So just a couple ideas. And finally, peer support. It has helped me, it has helped, I see the nodding faces and the smiles. It has helped many people in the room, and I'm babbling and getting over time, so I need to stop. But yeah, all of these.
If I could just, I'm not supposed to speak as a speaker, but one comment from my side to that question that was just raised. I think what we will be seeing moving forward is the DIY community, the We're Not Waiting community has been very, very strong developing these algorithms. We will see moving forward the DIY community, or even also moving into the hardware space. And that is tricky, but it is going to happen sooner or later with 3D printing and all of that coming up. So there's some exciting developments coming up that might not be industry driven, but again, that may be driven from within the community. That's number one. The other thing is, one of the challenges coming up when we talk about mission accomplished in the We Are Not Waiting community versus what's next is how can we use just the algorithms to improve therapy for those that might not have access to a sensor and a pump, but that might just be on MDI, but improve MDI therapy by using algorithms that are free of charge. So those are not the best solutions as we are used to here, but they will hopefully be improving quality of life and therapy outcomes for people living with diabetes without the need to access to hardware that is just not affordable. Because let's be honest, we all know that some of this hardware will not be around in low developing countries for a long, long time. So what we need is we need to find low-tech, not low-tech, but low-cost solutions that we can scale up, and software is the easiest part of that.
So we've been talking a lot about how the community, so much of what's going on is being led by the community. So that was what Open was looking at, it's what Dawn was speaking about, we've discussed that. And one of the other big conversations in the community is around diabetes stigma. And I just want to touch on that momentarily because I'm interested in what the panelists have to say about the intersection between access and stigma. I've got 2 minutes apparently, so when I say what the panel has to say, I'm going to ask Minu to contribute here because you haven't said anything. But where do you see that interplay between access and stigma?
Access and stigma. Well, actually I find it hard to reply to the question.
I've put you on the spot. So if there's anybody who wants to jump in there, yeah, if there is anyone, because I think that this is part of, I think we touched on this earlier today a little bit, but are we sometimes putting the horse before the cart before the horse, whichever way it's not meant to be. I'm jet-lagged, where we're focusing so much on access, which is important, but we've got to also get to the point where we're understanding what some of the barriers to individual access might be, and that certainly could be the stigma of diabetes. Am I just going to stand here and talk about this? Dawn, have you got something to say about it?
I think one of the biggest issues with access is the fact that when you have the technology, it is attached to you 24/7. And while that is a blessing in itself, it's also a burden. And I'm sure that most of us who've access to any style of glucose monitor that we wear or insulin pump that we wear have been told at least once that that's our diabetes cured. There seems to be a belief that that's the fix. And there's, on the flip side of that, there's also the embarrassment, the cringe that goes with having access to that technology and sharing a space with others who have type 1 who don't have access by virtue of their geographical location or the country they were born into or the finances which are in their bank account. And I think that's incredibly unfair and incredibly disempowering for both sides.
Thank you. I know that we could keep going with this discussion, but there's a lot of people outside who either want to come in or want to drag us somewhere else, and I know that there are ATTD waits for no one. Thank you to everybody for being here and listening. Don't go yet. Bastian's still got final words. Thank you for the questions and for people watching at home, and I'm sorry that we didn't get to everything, but I'm going to go sit down now. I'm done. Good. Thank you.
And thank you, Renza. Thank you, Renza, for facilitating this panel and taking the questions. There is a lot more that came in through Facebook Live and on the ATTD app, and I'm sorry, as always, that we never get to all of them, but this is the nature of a symposium like this.